Right, so this is now the start of part 3, so it's a different day for me as well. So I vaguely remember where I left off, but not completely. So, but I do remember kind of the steps that I took. So I am thinking of working this way towards the nose, just to start building up kind of this chunk of neck as we go along. So I'm going to scoot you in. I don't even know if this should still be in focus, if I am not mistaken. Yes. Yeah. So I'm going to kind of keep it there. I'll start with an HB pencil. This one is still sharp. Now I'm going to work actually from the collar. I'm going to start near the collar first. Very similar to all the other steps. So I'm going to keep it quite concentrated with my application, just so that it doesn't really leave too much marks, as we are still building up the fur foundation, the foundation of the fur in these areas. So until then, we're keeping it quite soft and more blended application. Just slowly making my way through. I will be moving my paper around just so that it makes it easier. And we still got to add in the actual chest area as well. So I want to just go in and kind of build this up first and then move on to the chest. What I will do is I'm going to kind of treat this as a portrait, so I'm not going to work it necessarily all the way to the edges of the paper. So it will just kind of help to fade it, make it more organic looking. So I'm just going to take a blending stump. I'm going to take a particularly dirty one and just blend out those areas. And then I'm going to take a stiff bristle brush and just add some powder. I'm gonna go over this whole neck area, and I'm gonna go over the collar as well, and I'm gonna add another layer of that again, so just to really build up the depth. As you can see, I took quite a liberal amount, so don't shy away from actually adding, so to speak. I'm going to go to the muzzle with kind of the excess over the collar as well, and I'm going to kind of use that excess just to start building up that area of chest and shoulder. Now I'm going to take, you can either take your smaller brush, but I'm just going to use my large one and kind of just sweep it over. Not caring much about the mess. Tombow mono eraser, you can use either one if you've got both, doesn't really matter. So I'm going to start at the top here. And because I've added some of the powder, you can kind of start mapping out these sections as well. So I'm going to focus mainly on the main direction of the fur. There are a few odd ones that move in a different direction, especially near the ends. So with this, I just want to get the main direction of the fur in rather than focus on those stragglers. So similar to what we did here is you kind of can connect, you don't necessarily have to pull the same strand all the way through. And also change the length of your application, as not all these hairs will have the same length. And have a very loose grip on the back, and that will also kind of facilitate having a more loose and organic application. So here in this area you'll have like a darker little section of fur. I'm kind of working around it first, getting the mono eraser a little bit more dirty, and obviously there's more layers on there, so it won't take away as much. So you can have a bit more of a softer application and not sort of like here for instance such a harsh application. So that's also kind of the thing you need to remember, is why you're starting somewhere and which way you will be going, because obviously a dirty eraser is not going to pick up as much, and an area that's got a lot more layers on is not going to remove as easily. And some of those areas you want to have a lighter hand, and that will just kind of help to plan ahead, so to speak. So I'm just removing some of the powder from the metal, but not like erasing the entire area. I'm just kind of taking out a little almost mock highlights. And I'm not looking at the reference at all for this, so this is merely just me just redefining the shape. It's still very visible to me. It hasn't gotten lost in the mix. So that's just a very quick and easy. That's not supposed to be very difficult. And here I'm just going to add where the stitching. Oh. And English sometimes escapes me. Beauties of teaching in your second language, but yeah. So just cleaning it up again, because now I'm going to go in this section and then I'm going to move up towards the muzzle. I do quite enjoy fur like this. This is very reminiscent of what you would do with a flowing mane. I quite like that you can pull it through and make little waves and shapes. So I do quite enjoy drawing fur like this. It just seems very daunting, but once you've got the flow, it's very, very nice and relaxing to draw. And you can actually, once you've got those foundation layers, you don't necessarily need to have the reference at hand to know what you're doing, which is nice because it's very intuitive layers. So it's a teaching moment. It also teaches you how fur interacts with each other and the contours of the body. So just going in this little area. There we go, and now we're going up towards the muzzle. I'm actually going to clean my eraser first. All the little whiskers and little strands of hairs, I'm not worried about them yet. These layers are still not that established that I need to worry about that too much, because I don't like adding those. That's what I consider a final detail. No, I don't like adding those in too early, because then I have to constantly work around them and you kind of lose your flow if you have to work around those types of details. So I leave them till last. I've done it enough to know that I can, with good amount of pressure and a clean, especially the rectangle mono eraser, a clean one of that, and a quick, decisive, hard pull on it, that I can get the desired effect and be able to put in those elements without any worry too much. So as you can see, really building up very quick and easy. I would say the first two parts took 6 hours. I would say we definitely over halfway. I don't want to say 3/4 of the way, because I know I can faff. I can take my time. So, and also, since I've decided to make this more of a blend and a soft end, you can obviously, because with what I've taught you in the rest of the drawing, you can definitely absolutely go to your edge of your grid with this drawing. You just follow the same steps as you did mainly with your neck fur, and some of the elements of what it will be very similar also to this part of the ear and this neck area with the flow of the fur and the contours. So I am making an artistic decision to end it more organically, but you definitely will be able to go all the way to the edge of your grid following the same steps as you did with the face, because it's very similar fur types, and because you're kind of already starting with the body fur in the neck, you can very easily just translate it on towards the rest of the area. So that's completely up to you, your choice, whether or not you want to complete the drawing fully, or just do like me and decide, no, I don't want to go to the edge. And I generally don't like, because I gridded this up all the way to the edge, I generally, it's the wrong way of saying it, I never draw to the edge of the paper. I always make my own edge. So if I was doing a commission of this, I would have done this more on a square size, rather than a actual just standard A4, which I did do. But I do like a portrait on a square size. It looks very nice. It just rounds it out. It gives enough space. So if you are choosing paper sizes, obviously I think about the size I want my subject. But I generally, say for instance, this dog is now looking in this direction. I would maybe add just a little bit more paper on this side, but add a substantial larger size than here on this side. So I want this direction that either the animal is moving or looking to have more white. And that just gives, you can obviously situate it right in the middle, but just to give a little offset, because if you're going to add in that shoulder bit, I will make the shoulder, so if this was a larger drawing, I would do this, put this in, and then add a little bit more substance on the side, just to pull it towards the way the animal's looking. So it's very similar to if you were doing a horse portrait. So the body of a horse, and obviously the labby's body is on this side of it. And you kind of want to show that, and then you just make more of an oval or eggy shape. So a point, and then you just whoosh. So that's kind of just also something to keep in mind, because a paper size, it seems like such a obvious decision, but it can also help you play with the subject. So I've got a larger drawing that I've been thinking about it non-stop. It's the 3 statues from the Acropolis in Greece. So the majority of the drawing is on the right, and then the left side is just blank white paper, and I'm going to keep it that size that I'm drawing it on, because I think it just gives like this just image of it standing somewhere in space, in air. It gives it more, it's just more punch to it. So that was a decision I made that would add to the drawing itself. So yeah, those types of things do play a role, whether you want a square or more rectangle. It's such a thought, but it can change the way your subject looks. And I think it's very important, especially if you do commission work, to be able to give the subject at least some space for it to sit on. And you've got to think about the big picture of what it will look like in a frame. So if I was going to frame this, there'd obviously be not a lot of space between the nose and the ear and the frame. So if I was going to frame this, I'll put like they put those double cards or things between that and the frame. I would kind of do that. You can even put a white to kind of give the illusion that it's a bigger paper. So yeah, it's just one of those, you find it as an artist that kind of has framed work and that has done commission work kind of as an obvious, everyone should know it type of deal. And I don't think a lot of artists, I framed some of my works. I've got 4 of my drawings in my home. And I kept it very simple because obviously I love black, white, grey, all shades of grey really. So they're all framed with a black frame, and then the cards are 2 shades of grey. So that's just my personal style, and I want to keep it more, the frame to me is just supporting. I don't want it to take away from the actual portrait. Whereas some people might frame it to have very elaborate frames. So it completely obviously depends on them, but I always like to see how people choose to frame my drawings. I think it's very interesting because you do work in black and white and grey, so they have the choice. They have a very bold choice. They can either go very bold and in your face framing, or like me, keep it very simple. And I think it also depends on the aesthetic of the house, or whether or not they will go for the frame that suits the animal's personality. So that's also something that kind of runs through my mind. It's just a strange thought, kind of that decision process people make. So I've kind of, while I was rambling, kind of got into autopilot mode with my mono eraser. And even I had my reference only open to show this part of the drawing. So everything that I kind of did everywhere else, I kind of, because I've got the guides, I could make executive autopilot decisions really. And you'd find yourself doing that the more you draw certain, not even subjects, but certain textures, that you will be able to find yourself to completely shut down, and your hands will kind of just know what to do and where to go, especially with fur, because it's such a repeating texture. If it was material, any type of knit material or something, I'd be fully concentrating on that. Like for instance, with gridding up drawings, I always, once it comes to the actual line work, I find it very difficult to like talk and draw because it takes a lot of mind power for me. But this whole fur business, it's such a soothing, it's almost meditative, really. So, and then you can literally go on like this for quite some time. It doesn't really matter how long you spend, or you could have probably, I don't mind, have gone over areas if you don't want to spend so much time on the actual erasing part. You could easily take your pencil and work over areas, because it also gives you time to kind of evaluate the drawing as you go along, because you're kind of covering the whole section. And then you can see areas where you maybe need to put in a lot of work. And because I've now left this drawing for a day or two, I'm looking at it with a fresh eye. So I generally tend to notice things that I might have missed, and that's why generally I don't have the attention span to finish things in a day. But I just like to give my mind time, because I know I miss things. So there's an app on my tablet that I use, Happy Color. It's basically like coloring, those paint by numbers type of things. It's got different themes and intensity of the amount of numbers and how detailed some of the paintings are, or the drawings or whatever. And I've noticed with that, it's made it blatantly obvious how easily I miss things. There would be numbers that I would go over in an area looking for this specific number multiple times and never find it. And then as soon as I switch over to looking for another number, it's like it just becomes very clear all of a sudden. I was like, how did I miss this? So I do miss things, I miss details. So you might sometimes throughout the tutorial process be noticing something and I'll just go over it and you'll be like, why are you not paying attention to that? And that's mainly just because of that reason. I get like blind to certain things and then I focus on something else and I'm like, oh, I didn't notice that. There it is. I see it now. So my process definitely, I think, developed in such a way that it gives me time to evaluate everything. So I'm just taking my HB pencil now, and before that I just took a large brush and just went over the areas to just soften it out slightly and take away that harsh look. So I just gave it a sharpen my HB pencil. I'm now going to work muzzle. I'm gonna just meet in the middle. So I'm gonna not focus on the nose itself. I'm now gonna focus on the areas surrounding the nose. So I generally tend to work, so I will kind of work on the edge a little bit because the edge does in some way form part of this area. So, but I'm not going to the inside. So here it's very highlighted, but I'm gonna go in with a pencil and put it in. It's gonna look odd at first because it's not supposed to be the same as the nostril itself. So it's going to look a lot darker than it actually is, but you just got to trust the process, as is with most things. So I'm going to work, I'm not going to necessarily work down, I'm going to look at the darkest areas first, establish that, just make sure that I still have got the right idea. So there's a subtle textural difference here along the edge where the fur starts and meets the lip. It's not as visible, it's not as prominent, it's not as important to the drawing necessarily. So you don't have to spend enough time, and it's also in the shadows. So it's not, in context to this drawing, it's not an important texture. It's going to be one of those cases where you more just want to get the feel that it is different to the fur, to the surrounding areas. It's very similar almost to these little bits and underneath the nostrils, so it's very similar in that regard, but some very subtle highlights in there. And actually, while I'm here, I'm just gonna, to help me with this part, I'm gonna add depth underneath here. So I'm gonna go to my gridded up version just so that I can see. So there's like a ridge line and then another little ridge line. So I'm going to first go with the deepest part of the ridge line. I'm going to take my dirty stamp and just first add it. Let me just see where it ends. Oh, so it goes all the way. So I'm actually gonna take it a bit shorter. So it goes all the way down here to the left of your middle lines. Let me just scoot you. So it goes all the way down here, but since I'm gonna kind of level it just underneath. I'm gonna go to here, so I'm gonna go all the way to my end of my grid and just pull up. For areas like this, I tend to not draw it block by block by block. I choose, like, you know where it starts, you know where it ends, and kind of in the middle I find a block, add a line, and then I just connect. So I don't follow it precisely always. It's just not necessary. Once you've got a start, end, and a middle point, you just connect it from there. So I'm not going to worry about these fluffs I've pulled out. I'm just going to go over it. And then here's also a line, so I'm just going to add that, and then kind of do just like that. So her shoulders, just give me a moment, let me just see. 16, so stay. So I instantly, when I made that line, I could see, compared to the rest of the drawing, that it didn't look quite right. And then I just double checked with my grid and saw that I was up too high and the angle was too steep. So those are types of things that you learn as you go. And sketching kind of does help, and the grid also does help. You've got to be able to see whether or not the marks you are making actually make sense with the rest of the drawing. So I'm just taking my kneaded eraser and just cleaning up around the edges a little bit. And I'm also going to take it down here. Start just removing this and start basically shaping out how I want it. So I'm just going to keep it upside down. So I make like I said with the egg, I make like a little just circular half circle thing, and here I don't want to go all the way to the edge, so I'm just taking away some of that. And the kneaded eraser for me, if you want to create this organic end to a portrait, that and a brush and powder, it's the quickest and simplest way to do it, because you want to kind of also have the texture fade into your blend, and so it'd be I think a good learning also skill to be able to not, I don't like it, some people do it where they just bluntly like it ends. I personally don't like the look of that, so I like to fade the textures and everything, so it becomes less and less. It keeps up the value to a certain point, and then it just fades into the white paper basically, and I just like the look of that. So now that I'm kind of seeing this, I might make an executive decision here as an artist to bring the shoulder down to about here. So now she's laying with your grid. If you were going to do this all the way down, I would keep the shoulder up, because you will be making this little, let me just scoot you out because you can't see where I'm motioning. So if you're going to go all the way to your edges of your paper, I would keep the shoulder up here, because you are going to show that it comes down into the leg and make a divot here. But since I am changing that and working in a circle, it's going to look a lot better if I kind of chop her shoulder and make it change the angle of it, so that it's more starts from this side, because it's now looking quite odd that her shoulder is so high up with the rest of the drawing looking like this. So this is now where I'm saying what is aesthetically going to look better for the way I've decided to end the drawing. So I'm going to take away this. So this is where you are going to either deviate from me and keep to the reference, or you are going to follow my steps. So because I've now made that decision, I'm going to first focus on this area and kind of slowly build my way up to see where I want the shoulder to end. That makes sense for the rest of this area. So I'm just going to take it down and bring it in. So that to me already looks a lot better than it was before. So that's now where her new shoulder for this layout is for me. So it's going to kind of change a little bit the shading and everything. So I just adjusted her pose. So for me, now that I've adjusted this pose, it's almost going to look as if this photo was taken while she was standing. And here you can employ other types of references from a portrait that was taken while the animal was standing. So that's kind of where I'm going now with the shoulder alignment, is that the shoulder is more straight down and it looks like she was standing when it was taken. Because this side still kind of makes sense to that whole standing thing. So I just want to make sure that it's, if you want to know where this angle will end, really, you can look up some other references. But here I'm kind of going on what I know about dogs in general. I've been around dogs my whole life. Even drawing horses, you kind of get a feel for anatomy and structure and the way the body is put together. So this you kind of pick up as you go along. And you are completely, as an artist, I would implore you to, if you think a certain look benefits the drawing more, then obviously go ahead and change it. Change the look and the feel. Make it your own. And this is the type of stylistic things that a realism artist can make. So, there we completely went off away from drawing and me just talking. But yeah, so I'm going to go back in with my HB and we're going to go back to where we actually were. Before I just do that, let me just fill in this area with powder and a brush. So like I said, I'm going to focus on this area first and then move my way down. About from where this little ridge and the collar goes, the fur is going to remain the same. But here I'm just going to slightly change it because she does have a little tuft that goes like that. So here I'm just going to kind of use what I know about fur and structure to make up kind of a new shoulder line. And it doesn't matter if you blend into the lip area. And then I'm just going to actually take one mono eraser, since I did go over the lip area, just to establish that jowl line again. Jowls. Scoot you in. There we go. So this was the first. So I'm just gonna also just. This is very quick. This is not supposed to be a step you stay on. So just kind of like scratching at it. And then just go like that. There we go. So this is just the HB again. I'm just going to take it underneath here just to deepen up that area. So with sections of fur like this, you can move through it quite quickly. There's some nice little shadow highlights. It's a very odd way of saying it, but even your shadows can have some form of highlight within the shadow. I know it sounds very strange, but to me there's subtle changes within your shadows. So I very rarely just draw a black shadow, go in with my darkest pencil. That's one of those little details that I like to pay attention to, is to show value changes within my shadows. Like obviously here, right next to this section of fur, you'll have your deepest line that's just solid. But as you go out to you'll have them about that size, your blackest part. But you want to start also showing the different little subtle value changes that goes from that, so that it's just not a solid blob of black with nothing going on. And that's part of the realism, is none of your subjects will be in actual real life in such a way that you won't be able to see the details in the shadows. So I'm just going to take a dark, well not a dark, but a dirty blending stump and just blend out those marks. I'm actually going to add just a little bit of powder. There. Take it down, go up to about the first third of that metal ring, and then she's got some nice little lines here in her fur, which is actually a very nice detail to draw. But as it goes down to the bottom, you'll obviously blend and fade that out with your drawing. So you can see it's very quick. It's all of a sudden you've got chest. HB pencil again. Let's see if I can actually stay on track. Still using your more blending circular motions in your darkest areas, and then pull out from there into your lighter areas. And even this little section is not technically light. I won't even consider it part of your midtones. This to me is shadow. It's very similar in value to what you would find right here, moving towards the edge of this little contour. So I'm quite pleased with how this is going. And because I am probably going to move all over, just going to give you a wider view. Yes, back to the muzzle. So there's some subtle changes in values just to show kind of her little where the whiskers kind of are situated. And this circular motion, it doesn't really matter if it is over areas where you kind of are still building up that texture. In areas like this, I won't go in circular motions. I'll keep adding in the same direction as the fur. But in areas like this where you're still building up your value, circular motions just gets the job done a lot quicker. And it kind of helps you keep that light pressure. And I always use a flat side. I always keep the pencil more flat towards the paper than upright, because I don't want to use the point. So here we've got a little bit more work done on the texture. I keep it in the direction of fur, not necessarily picking up and pulling, but just more up and down rather than circular motions. building up very nicely. So now I'm going to move back to this section of neck. And here I'll keep going in that direction of the fur. But just continuously lay over the top of each other, not necessarily individual little marks. Yeah, I take more of a upwards, more of a straight hold on the pencil, just to have a little bit more control and precision with my marks. Similar to the mono eraser, you can kind of work from different points. You don't need to necessarily have a continuous pull. Okay. Take my blending stump, just work my way through those areas that I applied the pencil. And also I connect as I go areas so that you just keep up the continuation of that value and that it looks part of the rest of the drawing. And similar to the pencil, in areas where you worked in circular motions, you can use circular motions with your blending stump. And then areas here where you had to use more actual lines, you would do similar with your blending stump. And also pull out into other areas with the blending stump, and that will also just help build up that fur feel. Won't do anything for the texture, but just helps with those foundational layers to blend in the direction of your fur. So as you can see, you're kind of now getting that organic swoosh feel to the fur. It's starting to build up that look. I'm just going to take a powder on my biggest flat brush. And this one can't really add depth. It's just really nice to get an even blend. So now I'm going to take my 2B pencil. Let me just... Music seems to have stopped, just give me a little moment. There we go. 2B pencil, and I'm going to give it a sharpen. And just going to do the same as I did with the HB. With this pencil, I'm going to have a slightly softer pressure first until I wear the point down. And just to get that more flat edge as well. Then once you've kind of worked it down, you can move on to other areas that's got a lighter application of pencil. Here I'm just gonna quickly take my mono eraser and just build up that little fur ridge. Just getting that shape correct, because in those beginning stages I am not as precise with the shapes of certain areas, and as I build up the values, I build up the precision of the shape as well. And I'm just going to also take the 2B slightly into the nose as well, more in this bottom area and in the shadows. And then we'll move along to the rest. I'm just adding a slight bit of depth and starting to build up that texture ever so slightly. So here we're gonna pull into the darker areas because I made that line with the eraser, and also the blending, just to kind of remove it, and it will still be lighter than the rest because it had less pencil and powder on it. Just gonna blend out this section just to get rid of that line, and also just blend out here. There we go. That is white little hairs. So when I go through with my mono eraser again, I will re-establish kind of that area as well. And there's little white hairs here as well. But all of that will be added as I go along. So because there's a cluster of white hairs here, and around the gel area, I do have to start showing that once I start putting the layers in, because there's nothing for me that I have to work around them for. That's just the integral part of that section of the drawing. So here we are going to take the pencil, a bit more of a closer grip, soft pressure when you are starting to pull out your lines. And I'm going to pull all the way into this darker section, even though the drawing, the fur doesn't go all that way. And I'm also going to pull up from the darker section just to get more difference, and that it's not so stiff. And with these layers, I'm now starting to be a bit more precise in my application. I'm starting to build up the actual shapes rather than just focusing on having the direction of the fur correct. And since we are now busy with the 2B, going to start paying a little bit more attention to my collar and all the little areas within the collar, because we haven't, this whole section is really more separate to the rest of the fur, so don't necessarily need to follow as correctly as the rest. So to me, I would treat this first more as shapes rather than trying to get the fur texture in, because to me it's such a small area and it's a little bit darker in value. So it's not necessary for you to really show the fur texture. You just need to make sure that your direction is still correct. And this is the type of area where you might want to go just one dark value and then call it a day. But unfortunately, I don't do that. Even in this small little section, there is some indication of fur texture ever so slightly. Right, so it actually seems that the last, I think it was just over 15 minutes, either didn't record. I know it was recording, otherwise my brain's gone completely to shit. But it seems the file, an error has occurred and it didn't record. So basically what I just did in that 15 minutes, I can't even remember where I ended. But I'm just going to give like a quick run through. Is I worked mainly on building up the texture in the neck area. So I took a 4B. And I started to build up the depth. It will be very similar to the process that we did in the face and the ears. So I took a 4B first, worked on the depth and everything, and then I blended it out, took a 2B and an F, and did the same, also using more precise and small strokes with your mono eraser, just to have more precision in your fur and direction of your fur. Also just remember that you layer your mono eraser marks on top of each other, and it's a lot of slower building up process. Very similar here is I worked ever so slightly, this was quite a straight edge with the mono eraser, just to kind of round it out more and then blend it over top. I also took an F pencil and built up this area over here, and gave it more substance, so to speak, and also used it to blend out that 4B pencil. Similar here to what I did in this small section is I used the mono eraser very precisely, small, very slow marks. I was thinking about more where I put them, layered them on top, kept it only in the highlighted sections, similar to here. Kept it out of your dark, sorry, it's just the cat, that's why I keep pausing. Similar to, where was I? Oh yeah, you keep out of your darker midtones and shadows. And just focus your mono eraser on that kind of layer of highlighting to the actual highlighted sections. And that way you don't take away from that values, and you will kind of keep it for another layer. And I also, so yeah, I think that's why I left off. But just remember that everything that I do in this section is exactly identical steps to what I followed in the ear and the face. Right, so now I'm going to continue on with building up these values, and you'll be able to see kind of the method that I used for whatever did not film. So it's very similar in nature. Just follow the steps that was used for previous first sections, and you should be fine. So now I am taking a B pencil, giving it a bit of a sharpen, organize myself. Right, so I am going to start here. And just, you can use varying pressure. It sometimes is beneficial to also have some organic difference in your fur texture, so not to have the same pressure all over. Just helps also convey that soft feel. So similar to earlier layers, don't just start at the same point every time, vary it. That keeps it organic and stop it from looking stiff. So what I'm just trying to do is get rid of that flat look and just have even texture all over, basically. Like here, I just want to get rid of that harsh difference in value by just building up the areas surrounding it. I'm going to take a blending stump, and this is also something that I did in those lost footage, is you use the blending stump in the same manner as your pencil and your mono eraser. So you're not actually blending, you're pulling the pencil out, and that way you are just further establishing that texture and fur feel and look. And then after I did that, I just go over lightly with a brush just to blend out that kind of work further and give a more even look. Take away that harshness. Now I'm going to go in the mono eraser, and the way I'm going to use the mono erasers now is exactly the way I used it before. So I just gave it a nice little sharpen, more precise application. Not such long continuous strokes. This will just give it a more organic and soft, and also give a more dense look to the fur. And also what you want to do is you want to kind of some pull out a bit further, some go a bit shorter, and that gives that more natural look and feel to it. and not so stiff. And with these, I'm using actually very light pressure. I don't want to take away too much. Obviously, if you get to areas where you've got more layers and darker application of pencil, we'll need to add more pressure. There we go. So just ever so slightly building up that texture. Just give that a once over with the brush, kind of more of a sweeping, almost like you dusting off all the little eraser bits. And I'm quite happy with the way that looks. Let me just scoot you out a little bit and bring you in a bit closer. So now that we've kind of established a similar look across the drawing, now what I want to do is start building up. So I've completely still ignored the collar and the sole shoulder. That will most likely continue doing that for a little while longer. Until I build up the depth, because it's not really essential to establish the values and kind of get it right. So now we're going to go back to the ear, and I'm just going to adjust again. Go. So I'm going to take a 6B and actually try the Staedtler Mass Lumograph 6B. Haven't tried it yet. If the other B range is any indication, this should be very similar to the Cretacolor B range. So before I start, I'm actually going to give it a slight layer of powder, just to add a little depth. Just want to check whether you are in focus, which I think you are not. There we go. So now that we are back in focus, I'm going to take my stiff bristle brush, get a powder on it, tap off all the excess, and I'm just gonna go over top. You will still see all the work you did underneath. This will just give an added layer of depth, kind of just step up the value of the ear. And I'm actually going to give it a second layer. Give it a second layer. And that just gives it a little bit more depth. Ever so slightly. So now that we've done that, I'm going to take my 6B pencil. I'm going to just get my bearings. Start where I've normally started with the ear, in this darker section. And now we're gonna go for that really deep value. Now this is kind of the part where you've got to think about your textures, you've got to think about your depth, your precision. And with the 6B, I'm also going to be using my F pencil to kind of help blend out those sections. So I'm just going to take it down as well in this area. So using very short and deliberate strokes. So going into this little section here. So this is now going to start really changing the look of your drawing, and now we're going for contrast and actual shadows and highlights. More focusing on your midtones and your shadows, and then in the end we'll work on those highlighted sections as well. So now I'm just going to take my F pencil, use this to blend as well. So you can see already now the difference it's going to make. Take a small little blending stump. And I'm also going to take my 2H for those little wispies. Now, because these wispies are not actually highlights like those here on the top of the heads that's kind of caught by sunlight, you can actually add them with your pencil, and then I just take my blending stump and soften it out. So just keeping those three pencils close, give it a blend, be as messy as you like, clean up. And you just, with that powder that you just kind of swept out, you just lightly pull into the ear, and you'll also get that effect of wispies. You could just for more precision. Take your mono eraser and also pull from the outside. Whatever like dirty little marks you get, you just take away. You also go from the inside. So very pleased with how that's looking. 6V again. As long as it's more depth, then you should be on track. So I'm also going to just take the 6V very lightly and just not all over, just in some spots, just to also work on those little wispies, some definition. Blend out that top little section. Right, now we're going to the ear itself. Like with most things, we start with our darkest section first. So I'm going to this fold here. So I'm quite, when I'm looking at my reference, I'm quite close, quite zoomed in. And this is not like other layers where it's continuous application over the whole area. This is more thought through little bits. Whereas you're gonna take another pencil to fill in those lighter values surrounding it. And here, just to give also just with lighter pressure, you use your 6B in this section. It's going to look quite stark and everything, but this is now where we really start getting to those final values and details. So that being said, your final kind of details also is technically your final values. Because details are not technically just a bunch of small little lines that you make. It's that final push and application to finalize your values as well. So that's basically what I mean with final details, is actually just finalizing your values. And within those final values, you make your small little marks for your texture and your highlights. So that's actually a better way of putting it, as your details is just a collection of either large and small details with the correct value. So that's just all it is, really. So taking my F pencil, and also this F pencil I use to even out that graininess that the 6B has. And I was correct in my assumption that it will be similar to the Cretacolor B range. So I do quite like that. It's just the only difference that I can see is it's not as soft. That I will say is the only difference. So also using the F pencil with a lot harder pressure, just to also add in additional texture and lines. And just also working in the wispies. So it will deepen up areas of the 6B and then also create a nice gradient and blend into slightly lighter values as well. Six B again, shorter strokes because here it changes direction. I'm going to deepen up some of these little dark shadows even more. And I'm going to take a blending brush and just run it through. So go up into this little section. There we go. Now taking mono eraser, where's my other one? And we're just going to work on the highlights. So you can see now with the top layers of values, I kind of go smaller section by section. And that just kind of helps you keep in that mode of precision, small detailed marks, not rushing. It just helps keeps your mind on working through the section rather than like with other layers where I move around quite a lot and quite quickly. So here you can see I do add sometimes a harsher just mark eraser, and that just emulates kind of what you did with your pencil, and that just gives it a contrast. I will go over with a brush in these sections, but that will give you the idea of short kind of hairs that stand up and out and doesn't lay flat on the skin actually. So it just helps give that look. If you're a little bit more harsh and contrasted with your erasing and pencil marks. There you go. So just go over that with a brush and it blends in very nicely, that section. So I'm just going to take my F pencil again. And just continuing on with that section and working my way down, adding little lines for the fluffies as well. Before I move along, just going to take my 6B and deepen up this crease. And also just go into slightly just blending out that top line, going back to short little marks. Same here. And I'm going to take my 2H first. And here the wispies play more of a role. So I'm going to take my 2H. Remember to kind of every now and again just change the direction of one. There you go. Give it another little blend with your brush. Not brush, blending stump. And the thing is, hair moves over the top from the top little flap as well. So you're going to just take your F pencil. Remember to continuously check whether or not you're going in the right direction, obviously because you're now working with your smaller, more precise details. You're going to be very aware of those small little changes in direction, as in this case. So back to my 6B. And I just gave my 6B a sharpen. And just every now and again just adding some texture and intricacies. And because some of these 6B marks is intended more as shadows, that's why you want to keep it more sparse and not as on top of each other. So now moving along, so this section of the ear is darker than this section in the middle. So it's a very subtle value change across the ear as well. So we're gonna start deepening up this side even more. And you don't want any long sections of a highlight, so just break it up with your 6B just to indicate little clumps of fur. And now that your 6B is sharper, it should be also not have that grainy texture. And also the more layers you add, your B pencils will kind of stop doing that, because your lower layers have already started to fill the grain of the paper. So I'm actually going to take a lighter pencil. So I'm going to take my HB, give it a sharpen, just so that I can have more of a base, a darker base value to work off of. So this is my HB pencil. Very similar to what I would do with the 6B. But you just want to fill in majority of that area to have a bit of a darker look to it, and you're going to go all the way around to where it kind of swoops up. It makes this little swoop in a darker value. You're going to go underneath as well, pulling into this section until it meets right here at the bottom. So use that to, you can even use the HB in these top sections as well. So already now you can see it looks thicker. It's built on top of those layers that you've already put in, and it's given you a great guide on the end look, because you also want to use those initial layers to see whether or not you're happy with your technique in creating the texture. It gives you kind of time to play around on whether or not it's gonna make it easier to create the texture, or whether you need to kind of figure out a better method. So I'm just blending out that HB. So going to kind of these little areas as well. So now you can see it's darker. I'm just going to take a brush back in with my 6B, and we're just going to continue on with creating those little shadows for your clumps of hair. So we're working our way from the bottom up, and I always find it easier to put in my highlights for certain things when I've already got a dark base every now and again. And as once you put in your highlights, you can add more shadows into that section. So I'm just going in, since I've got my 6B in hand, I am going to just go to this top section again, and this time just to and I will continue to kind of build this up once I've gone in with a layer of the mono eraser again. So here those little shadows aren't as pronounced as on the side of the ear. And I'm gonna kind of concentrate them more on this flatter section. Just taking the 6B also to create this line. of shadow, and I'm going to create it not by actually making a line but using short strokes to just deepen up that section. Also just right on the edge, just pull into the ear, just to also help build up that depth underneath. So already this is already pushing more depth across, so you want to get that feel that's in this, especially this section. I really like the depth of this section right here. This will dictate how deep you will go in your other shadows and values that is similar to that. As you can see, even the 6B with very light pressure leaves soft texture. Your B pencil doesn't necessarily just have to be for your harsh lines and really dark areas. You can use them in your light areas as well as your midtones. Now I'm going to take my F pencil and just build on that layer of the 6B pencil. And this I'll also just use to build up the depth. Using quite a lot of pressure, because now you have to use a bit more pressure to make the F pencil worth using. It's still visible, I can still see what I'm doing, but it's just blending out that F of that 6B and also just adding slight depth also in places. So just going in this to deepen up the 6B and also give it an even value. There we go. Just give it a blend. Now I'm going to take my mono eraser . just start here at the top. Not all over the same. You're gonna, similar to the 6B, kind of pick and choose your areas where you want to add it. Have some of those areas have a more heavy pressure, others more light, just to show some variation. Right, now we're going to add our little highlights. There we go. There we go. So I'm very pleased with the way it's going. So here, using a bit more pressure, but I'm gonna blend it out. Even sometimes I'll just take my finger and just soften it up, and then go over the top with another layer of mono eraser. So as you can see, I'm not going over the entire section, just in certain spots. There we go. So I'm quite pleased with how that's looking, just giving there a little blend. So that, to me, it's not obviously this is a lot better of a value and built up than it was. You're gonna see that once you kind of fill in the entire section, I will go over it again, and just to establish those final highlights and final shadows. So this is kind of the penultimate layers, so to speak, what we're working on here. Obviously there's still a lot of work that needs to be done here, down here, but it goes by, for me, these types of fur goes by a lot quicker. So you can see, just in relation to the rest of the face, your eye is immediately drawn to this section because it's the darkest point, and it's not supposed to be. This is supposed to be your darkest section right here, even with some depths in this area. So that's kind of what you want to do, is you want to have balance, and that just kind of shows what happens when your values aren't in balance. Your eye immediately gets pulled to an area where kind of the unbalanced starts, or you have your darker sections.